It started on a quiet Saturday afternoon. It's the kind where the air felt still and peaceful, and everyone in the neighborhood seemed to be tucked away behind their trimmed hedges and neatly painted fences. The community where he lived was one of those HOA-run places where the houses looked nearly identical. The grass was always short, and the rules were even shorter on patience. People kept mostly to themselves, but everyone knew who the strict ones were, who the friendly ones were, and who the people were that everyone tried to avoid. He had ordered a special meal that day. It wasn't just any food delivery. It was a full catered spread for a small birthday gathering he was planning for his sister later that evening. He wanted everything to be perfect because she rarely visited, and this was one of the few chances they had to sit together and enjoy time like they did when they were younger. The meal wasn't cheap. It had roasted dishes, sides, desserts, and even a few special items his sister loved but couldn't find easily. The total came out to just over $500, but he didn't mind. It felt worth it. He tracked the delivery on his phone, watching the small map icon move closer and closer to his home. Around 4 p.m, he received the notification, "Your order has been delivered." He smiled, walked to the door, and expected to see the large insulated catering bags waiting on the welcome mat. Instead, he stepped outside and froze. There was nothing there. The doormat sat alone. No bags, no boxes, no trace that anyone had left anything at all at first. He wondered if the delivery driver had gotten confused and left the order at the wrong house. It happened sometimes. Some of the homes looked incredibly similar. He checked the app again, but the picture the driver uploaded showed his exact doorstep. Same mat, same potted plant, same door. He felt a small twist in his stomach. He scanned the street. Everything looked normal. A few cars passed by. A distant dog barked. A couple 2 houses down was trimming their bushes. But his delivery, his expensive, carefully planned birthday meal was nowhere in sight. He decided to walk to the neighbor on his left. The older man who lived there was friendly, always waving when they passed each other in the morning. He knocked gently on the door. The man opened it with a surprised expression. "Hey, sorry to bother you," he said politely. "I was expecting a big food delivery a few minutes ago. You didn't happen to see anything on my porch, did you? Maybe someone picked it up by mistake?" The man shook his head. "No, I didn't see anyone come by. But I wasn't really watching the street. I hope it didn't get taken." "Yeah, me too," he replied. The worry already pressed heavier in his chest. He thanked the man and walked to the next house, where a young couple lived. They were nice enough, but they always seemed busy. The woman answered the door. "Sorry, I just wanted to ask, have you seen anyone walking near my place in the last 10 minutes? I had a delivery dropped off, but it's gone now." The woman blinked in surprise. "Gone? As in stolen?" "I'm hoping not," he said softly. "Maybe the driver left it at the wrong place." She stepped outside a little and looked toward the street as if expecting to see the culprit right there. "I didn't see anything. But you might want to check your cameras." "Yeah, I will. Thanks." He continued asking a few more neighbors who happened to be outside. Most shook their heads sympathetically. A couple seemed too nervous to make eye contact, like they didn't want to get involved. That reaction troubled him, but he couldn't blame them. This neighborhood had a history of messy confrontations, especially when it involved the HOA. And at the center of most of those confrontations was a woman everyone simply referred to as her. No one said her name unless they absolutely had to, because it came with rolled eyes, deep sighs, or muttered complaints. She was known for walking around the community like she owned it, pointing out problems with people's lawns, complaining about cars parked slightly crooked, and reporting even the smallest rule violations. She had a habit of checking on deliveries and packages, too. People joked that she thought she was the guardian of the neighborhood, though most saw her as someone who took her position way too seriously. He didn't want to accuse anyone without proof, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. If anyone would take something that wasn't theirs, justify it without blinking, it would be her, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions. Instead, he went back inside and pulled up the feed from his doorbell camera. The device stored motion-activated clips, so he scrolled back to the time the delivery should have arrived. The first clip showed the delivery driver walking up the steps. dropping off the large insulated bags and taking a picture. Everything was exactly as expected. The driver then walked away. He fast-forwarded to the next clip. This was where his heartbeat started to pick up. The screen showed someone approaching his porch, a person, walking with slow, deliberate steps. He leaned closer to the screen. The figure wore casual clothes. The posture looked familiar. The way they walked looked familiar. He paused the clip. His stomach tightened. He knew that walk. It was the same neighbor who constantly complained about everything. The same woman who once lectured him because his trash bin was 2 minutes late being pulled in. The same woman who left notes taped to neighbors' doors about little things. Most people would never notice. The woman many residents avoided. She walked right up to his porch in the video, looked down at the delivery, and without hesitation, picked it up. The bags were heavy, but she lifted them as if taking her own groceries home. Then she glanced around, tucked the bags close to her side, and walked away calmly, like nothing was strange about it at all. He stared at the screen for several long seconds. For a moment, he wasn't sure whether he felt angry, shocked, or just disappointed. How could someone think it was okay to take something that clearly wasn't theirs? And not just something smaller, huge, catered order. It didn't even make sense. He replayed the clip again just to make sure he wasn't seeing things. But the footage was clear. Too clear. There was no confusion. No mistake. No chance the bags had blown away or gotten misplaced. They had been taken deliberately. He sat back in his chair and tried to process everything. He didn't want trouble with the HOA, and certainly not with someone who always made things more dramatic than they needed to be. But this wasn't a small issue. He had spent hundreds of dollars. He had a birthday dinner to host, and most importantly, someone had taken something that wasn't theirs. He stepped outside again, hoping maybe someone had seen something else, some detail he missed. As he walked down his driveway, a neighbor across the street gave a small wave. The man hesitated for a moment before crossing over. "Did you lose something earlier?" The neighbor asked quietly, glancing around as if someone might overhear. "Yeah," he replied. "My food delivery? A big one." The neighbor looked uncomfortable. "I think I saw someone carrying some large bags not too long ago. I don't want to cause problems, but it looked like the same person who usually checks everyone's mailboxes." He didn't say the name. He didn't need to. "Thanks," he said gently. "I appreciate it." The neighbor nodded quickly and went back inside. As though relieved, the conversation was over. He went back into his home and sat down, trying to think through his next steps. He didn't like confrontation, but he couldn't simply let this go. His sister was expecting a nice evening. He had planned everything so carefully. And now, the food was gone, taken right from his porch. He pulled up the camera footage again, just staring at it. It seemed unreal. He hadn't done anything to upset anyone. He had followed the community rules, kept to himself, tried to be a good neighbor. But that didn't stop someone from walking onto his porch and taking what wasn't theirs. He wondered what he should do next. Should he confront her? Should he go to the HOA? Should he call the delivery company? He didn't want to escalate things, but ignoring it felt wrong. There was still time before his sister arrived, but not enough time to reorder everything. The catering service might not even be able to remake the order that quickly. He rubbed his forehead, feeling the pressure build. This wasn't just about food. It was about respect, about boundaries, about someone deciding they could take advantage of others, just because they held a bit of authority. He took a deep breath and stood up. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to be brushed aside. Not this time. The rest of the evening drifted by in a strange haze. He couldn't stop thinking about the video he had watched over and over, each time hoping maybe he'd notice some detail that explained everything. But no matter how many times he replayed it, the facts stayed the same. She had taken it. She had walked onto his porch and taken something that wasn't hers, as if she had the full right to do it. He didn't sleep well that night. Thoughts kept circling in his mind. Questions, frustrations, worries. It wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about how things worked in this neighborhood, how certain people acted like they had power over others. He had always tried to avoid conflict, but this situation felt different. It felt personal. The next morning, he stepped outside to get some fresh air. The community was usually quiet at that time, with only a few joggers and dog walkers passing by. But when he reached the end of his driveway, he noticed something unusual. A few neighbors stood in small clusters, whispering to each other while giving nervous glances toward the HOA building. The HOA building, small, neat, and always locked tight, was located near the entrance of the neighborhood. It served as the meeting spot for board members and the storage place for rulebooks, forms, and anything else they used to keep everyone in line. Curiosity pushed him to walk closer. As he passed, one of the neighbors gave him a sympathetic look. "Hey," the neighbor called softly. "Did you find what happened to your delivery?" He hesitated. "Yeah, I checked my camera." Someone took it. Another neighbor joined the conversation. We all heard. Word spreads fast around here. And, well, everyone kind of figured who might be involved. He nodded slowly, not wanting to say her name out loud yet. It felt like speaking it made the situation heavier. The first neighbor continued in a hushed voice. "She's already out walking around this morning, acting like everything is perfectly normal." He followed the neighbor's eye line. Sure enough, down the sidewalk, the familiar figure walked with that same upright posture, chin raised as if inspecting the world around her. She carried a clipboard, though no one knew why, because no one remembered ever seeing her write anything on it. It seemed more like a prop meant to make her feel important. For a moment, he thought about going straight to her, telling her he had the footage and asking her why she did it. But something inside him stopped him. Confronting her alone didn't feel right. She had a way of twisting conversations, turning herself into the victim or blaming others entirely. People had warned him about this before. Instead, he decided to talk to the HOA board. Surely they would help. After all, this was theft. A clear violation of rules and simple decency. The HOA office was unlocked for once. The door slightly open as if inviting him inside. He stepped into the small lobby, which had a faint smell of old paper and cleaning products. A few chairs lined the walls, and a bulletin board displayed flyers about upcoming community cleanup days and holiday events. Behind a desk sat a board member, a middle-aged man, with glasses who always tried to stay neutral. He looked up when he entered. "Morning," the man said politely. "Can I help you with something?" He took a breath. "Yeah, I need to report something. Something was stolen from my porch yesterday. A delivery." The man frowned, adjusting his glasses. "Stolen? Are you sure it wasn't delivered elsewhere?" "That happens sometimes, I'm sure." "I have video." Someone walked up and took it. The man's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Do you know who it was?" He hesitated again. The camera shows it clearly. It was her. The name wasn't spoken, but the man's expression changed instantly. He leaned back in his chair with a heavy sigh. "Ah," the man murmured, looking suddenly tired. Her, the reaction told him everything. This wasn't the first time she had caused problems. "I need the HOA to step in," he continued firmly. "She took a delivery worth over $500. I can't just ignore that, and I don't want to handle this all on my own." The board member folded his hands, thinking. "Do you have the footage?" "Yes," he said. "I can show you right now." He pulled out his phone, opened the video, and pressed play. The board member leaned forward, watching silently as the woman approached the porch, grabbed the bags, and walked off. When the video ended, the man exhaled deeply. "Well, that is very clear." "So what can the HOA do?" he asked. "This is a serious issue. It's not just some rule violation." The board member gave him an uncomfortable look. "The thing is, she's been on the board for a long time. She's very involved in everything, and she tends to be difficult. If we take action, there will be drama. A lot of it." He stared in disbelief. "So you're telling me nothing will be done? Even with video proof?" "I'm not saying nothing," the man replied quickly. "But we need to handle this carefully. If we approach her the wrong way, she claims she was just trying to protect the community. You know how she is. She'll say she'll move the package for safety or some other excuse." He felt frustration rising in his chest. But that's not what she did. She took it home. It wasn't safety. It was theft. The board member lowered his voice. I agree with you, but she has influence here. A confrontation might cause more problems for you in the long run. You might become her new target. He rubbed his forehead again, feeling the same pressure as the night before. So what should I do? Just let her get away with it? The man looked around as if making sure no one else was listening. Off the record. You might want to handle this outside the HOA. File a police report. You have the evidence. They'll be able to do more than we can. Hearing that suggestion was surprising. He didn't expect the HOA to basically admit they were powerless or unwilling to act. It bothered him deeply. He nodded slowly. Thanks for being honest. I appreciate it. The man gave a sympathetic expression. I wish things were different around here, but she's been controlling the board for so long that people have given up pushing back. He left the office feeling even more determined. If the HOA wouldn't help, then he'd have to take matters into his own hands. But before going to the police, he decided to talk to the delivery company. Maybe they'd refund the order or remake it. He made the call as soon as he got home. After explaining everything, the representative apologized and said they would investigate. They could offer partial compensation. But because the delivery had been made to the correct address, it wasn't fully their responsibility. They offered a discount on a future order. That didn't solve the main problem. He hung up, feeling even more disappointed. His sister had understood when he explained what happened. But he still felt guilty. The birthday dinner he planned so carefully had turned into a simple meal they threw together at the last minute. She told him it didn't matter. At the time together was more important, but he couldn't shake the feeling of frustration. The incident kept replaying in his mind. It wasn't just the loss of money. It was the behavior, the assumption that she had the authority to take what wasn't hers. And the way the neighborhood seemed afraid to stand up to her. Around noon, he heard a knock at his door. He opened it to find a neighbor he'd seen many times, but never spoken to directly. The neighbor shifted nervously. Hey, the man said softly. I heard what happened. I wanted to tell you. You're not the only one she's done this to. She took someone's gardening supplies last month and claimed they were a code violation. Another time she removed holiday decorations and said they weren't allowed even though they were. People just let it slide because they didn't want trouble. He listened carefully. Has anyone ever reported her? The neighbor shook his head. People tried, but the HOA always defended her. She's been around too long, knows the rules, knows how to twist things. Honestly, the whole community has been stuck with her leadership for years because no one wants to challenge her. Hearing that made the situation even clearer. She wasn't just strict. She wasn't just bossy. She was someone who used her position to control people, crossing lines repeatedly because she believed no one could stop her. And maybe until now. No one could, but he wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. Not when he had clear evidence. He thanked the neighbor for stopping by. After closing the door, he took another long breath and picked up his phone. He opened the police department's non-emergency line. He hesitated only once before dialing. As the phone rang, he felt a strange mix of nervousness and relief, nervous about what would come next. Relieved that he was finally taking action. A calm voice answered. This is the non-emergency line. How can I help you? He swallowed and spoke with steady determination. I need to report a theft, and I have video proof. The officer on the other end of the line listened patiently as he explained everything. He spoke slowly, trying not to let his frustrations spill over. He described the delivery, the missing food, the camera footage, and the lack of help from the HOA. The officer asked a few questions. When did it happen? How much was the order worth? Did he know who took it hand? He answered each one carefully. When he mentioned the value of the delivery, the officer paused for a moment. Over $500? And you have video proof of someone taking it? Yes, he answered. Clear video. All right, the officer said, sounding more serious. We'll send someone over to take a formal report. Just stay home for now. He thanked the officer and hung up. The moment the call ended, he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't sure what would come from all this. He had never dealt with anything like it before, never had a reason to call the police for something personal. It felt strange and heavy. He paced around the living room for a few minutes, looking occasionally at the front door. Part of him felt anxious, wondering if this was the right choice, but another part of him felt relieved. He was finally standing up for himself, finally drawing a line. About half an hour later, a police car rolled slowly down the street. It stopped in front of his house, and an officer stepped out. The officer walked up the driveway with a calm, professional expression. "Good afternoon," the officer greeted. "You the one who called about the stolen delivery?" "Yes, that's me," he replied. "Thanks for coming." The officer took out a small notepad. "All right. Let's go through everything. Start from the beginning." They stood on the porch as he explained the entire situation again, pointing to the spot where the delivery had been dropped off. The officer took notes carefully, asking for clarification whenever needed. "Do you have the footage ready?" the officer asked. "Yes," he said. "I'll show you." They went inside, and he pulled up the video on his TV screen so the officer could see it clearly. He played the clip from the moment the delivery was dropped off, and the part where she appeared on the porch. The officer watched quietly, leaning slightly forward. The video left very little room for doubt. When it ended, the officer nodded slowly. "That's pretty clear. So, what happens next?" he asked. "Well," the officer began, "since the value of the item is over $500, this isn't just a small matter. This falls under a level of theft we have to treat seriously. And because you have evidence, we can most likely move forward with questioning her." He felt both relief and nervousness. "Do I need to confront her myself?" The officer shook his head. "No, and I'd strongly advise against it. Let us handle that part. People can get defensive when confronted, especially if they believe they did nothing wrong. We'll talk to her, document everything, and take the appropriate steps." He exhaled slowly. "Okay, thank you." The officer collected a copy of the footage, took down the delivery details, and promised to follow up. After the officer left, he stood in his doorway for a moment. Watching the car roll away and disappear around the corner, the street looked peaceful again. Birds hopped on lawns. A couple walked their dog. Everything looked normal, as if nothing unusual had happened. But inside him, nothing felt normal. He tried to keep his day as ordinary as possible, doing a bit of cleaning, making a simple lunch, checking his emails. But every few minutes, the memory of the footage replayed in his head. He couldn't shake it. Around mid-afternoon, as he was sitting on the couch, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was from the neighborhood group chat, a group he rarely looked at because it was usually filled with complaints. But today, people were talking. He tapped on the message. Someone had posted, "Police car seen near the entrance. Anyone know what's going on?" Another neighbor responded, "Saw an officer walking toward one of the homes. Maybe someone reported something." Then another message, "Hope it wasn't a break-in," sighed. The news would spread fast once they learned who the officer was visiting, and he wasn't wrong. About an hour later, he looked out the window and saw the same officer walking down the sidewalk toward her house. The woman who took his delivery was in her front yard, trimming plants that didn't need trimming. She looked up as soon as she noticed the officer. Even from a distance, you could tell she stiffened. The officer approached her. They talked for a moment. She gestured sharply, her voice rising, although he couldn't hear the words. He recognized the defensive body language. She crossed her arms and pointed toward the houses as if blaming someone else. The officer remained calm, nodding occasionally, but still firm. Then the officer said something that made her expression shift. Her face froze, and her mouth opened slightly. He could guess what it was. The value of the delivery, and the fact that they're wise, video proof. She shook her head vigorously, denying it, then walked briskly toward her house as if trying to escape the conversation. But the officer followed. They disappeared inside for a few minutes. Neighbors began stepping out onto porches, pretending to water plants or check mail while watching closely. Gossip traveled faster than the wind in that neighborhood. Finally, the officer exited her house with a serious expression. She stepped out behind him, looking pale and anxious, no longer carrying herself with the same confidence she had earlier that morning. The officer spoke to her again, this time gesturing toward the street. She looked like she was arguing, shaking her head and waving her hands. But then something changed. She stopped arguing, Her shoulders dropped slightly. She looked defeated, shocked even. After a moment, the officer walked away and headed back toward the road. She remained frozen in her front yard for a long time, staring at nothing. He didn't know exactly what was said. But one thing was clear. She wasn't happy. Later that evening, there was a knock at his door. He opened it cautiously, half expecting her to be standing there. But instead, he found a different neighbor, one who lived down the street. "Hey," the neighbor said, sounding troubled. "I heard what happened. She's telling people she didn't steal anything. She's saying the delivery was left in the wrong place and she was protecting it. But everyone saw the police talking to her. People are starting to question her story." He nodded. "I'm not looking to start drama. I just needed to do what was right." "I get it," the neighbor said. "Honestly, she's pushed people around for too long. Maybe this will finally make things change around here." The neighbor left and he closed the door slowly. Thinking about those words, maybe this really would change something. The next morning, he woke to another wave of messages in the community chat. People were buzzing with theories. Officer was at her house yesterday. Something big must have happened. Anyone know why she looked so upset? He scrolled through quietly until he reached a message that made him pause. A neighbor had written, "I heard she's being called to the station for more questioning." He swallowed. Things were moving faster than he expected. Around noon, the officer called him back. "We've spoken to the person in question," the officer said. "She claims she didn't intend to steal anything. Says she moved the items for safety." He closed his eyes briefly. "That's not what happened." "I know," the officer said. "And the video supports your version, not hers. We're continuing our process. I'll update you soon." "Thank you," he replied. When he hung up, he felt a strange mix of relief and tension. He didn't want to harm anyone's reputation unnecessarily. But truth was truth. That afternoon, he decided to take a quiet walk outside to clear his head. As he stepped out, he noticed several neighbors giving him supportive nods. Some avoided eye contact, unsure of what to say. And then, as he walked past her street, he saw her standing at her window. She stared at him, not with anger, at least not the kind he expected. It was something else: fear, embarrassment, denial. It was hard to tell. He didn't stare back. He simply kept walking, because no matter what she felt now, the truth had already been set in motion. The video existed, the report was filed, and the officer had made it clear. The situation was serious. He knew deep down that things in the neighborhood were never going to be the same. Not for him. Not for her. Not for anyone who had lived under her constant watch. This was no longer just about a stolen delivery. It was turning into something much bigger. It was early the next morning when the phone call came. The sound of the ringtone cut through the quiet of the house, pulling everyone out of the usual calm. The call wasn't from a friend or a neighbor. It was from the local police department. The man who answered the call felt a strange twist in his stomach, like he already knew something big was about to unfold. Even though he had filed the report the previous day, he didn't expect things to move so quickly. The officer on the other end spoke in a calm, professional tone. He explained that they had reviewed the video he sent and that they needed to speak with the woman who had taken the delivery. He didn't sound angry or excited. He simply explained that the value of the stolen delivery changed the situation. The man listened carefully, nodding even though the officer couldn't see him. When the officer finished talking, he let out a slow breath. Things were officially moving forward. A couple of hours later, 2 officers drove into the community. Their car rolled slowly past the neat houses and well-trimmed bushes. They weren't rushing or trying to make a scene. They were just going about their job. A few neighbors peeked out from behind curtains as the car passed. Some already knew what was happening, and some were simply curious. The officers parked near the woman's house. She was outside in her driveway, pulling weeds from her flower bed. She didn't notice the officers at first. When she finally looked up, her expression shifted quickly, first confused, then annoyed. She stood up slowly, brushing dirt off her hands. The officers approached her politely. They explained why they were there and asked her a few questions. At first, She put on her usual confident face, the same one she used whenever she wanted to lecture her neighbors. She insisted she didn't steal anything. She claimed she was only trying to keep the neighborhood safe. She said packages shouldn't be left outside because it made the community look careless, but the officers remained calm. They explained that they had seen the video. They explained that the value of the delivery made the matter serious. She blinked a few times, clearly trying to understand what they were saying. She seemed surprised, as though she didn't think something like this could turn into a real legal issue. She tried to argue, saying it was just food, nothing important. But the officers had already made up their minds. When they asked her about the delivery, she hesitated. She looked back toward her garage, as if thinking about how much she could admit. She tried to claim she still had the food stored somewhere, but when they asked to see it, she froze. She knew she couldn't show them because most of it was already gone. She had served it to her friends at a small get-together she held the day it was delivered. One of the officers asked again, this time more directly. She looked down at the ground and sighed. She quietly admitted that she might have given some of it away. The officers exchanged a quick glance. They didn't raise their voices or speak harshly. They simply explained that taking something that didn't belong to her, especially something worth that amount, was considered a crime. The woman kept insisting she didn't know the price. She said she thought it was just a regular food order. She said she believed she had the right to remove anything left outside because she was part of the HOA board. The officers gently corrected her. Being on the board didn't give her the authority to take other people's things. And even if she didn't know the exact cost, the fact remained that she took something that wasn't hers. Slowly, the reality began to sink in. Her shoulders sagged a little. She tried to explain herself again, but her voice didn't have the same confidence it usually carried. It was softer, almost shaky. A few neighbors had started to gather at a distance. They stood on sidewalks or behind their fences, quietly watching. The officers told her they needed her to come with them. She reacted quickly, her voice raising slightly as she tried to argue again. But the officers remained patient. They explained every step, never rushing her and never trying to embarrass her. They reminded her that she would have a chance to explain everything later. After a long moment of silence, she nodded reluctantly. The officers guided her to the car. They didn't treat her roughly or dramatically. They simply followed procedure. The neighbors whispered among themselves, though their voices were low and unsure. Some of them had dealt with her strict rules and complaints for years. Others were surprised that things had gone this far, as she sat in the back of the patrol car. She looked around the neighborhood she had once tried to control so tightly. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was more like she finally understood that she had pushed things too far. The car drove away slowly, leaving behind a neighborhood that felt strangely quiet. People returned to their homes, still whispering to one another. Some felt shocked, others felt relieved, and others just felt sad that things ended this way. Meanwhile, the man who had filed the report received another call from the officer. He stepped outside to answer it. The officer explained what had happened and assured him that everything was being handled properly. The man thanked the officer, though he wasn't sure how he felt. He didn't feel happy or victorious. He just felt a mix of relief and disbelief that something as simple as a food delivery had led to all of this. He looked around his street, taking in the calm afternoon light. He remembered all the times he tried to solve things peacefully. He remembered how he hoped the issue would end with just an apology, but things had taken a different turn, one he couldn't have predicted. The rest of the day moved slowly. The neighbors seemed more talkative than usual. Some approached him to ask if he was okay. Others asked what would happen next. He politely responded, keeping his answers brief. He didn't want to make the situation bigger than it already was. He knew that gossip could spread fast in a place like this. Later that evening, he sat on his porch thinking about everything. He thought about the delivery, the video, the conversations with the HOA, and now the police visit. He realized how much pressure had built up in the neighborhood over the years because of one person's need for control. Maybe this situation would finally help people speak up. He wasn't angry anymore. He just hoped that moving forward, the community would feel lighter, more peaceful, and more respectful. He didn't want anyone to feel scared of speaking up or standing their ground. As night settled in, the neighborhood became quiet again. Porch lights flickered on, and the sound of crickets filled the air. The man took one last look around before heading back inside. Even though the day had been heavy, he felt things might finally be changing. He closed the door gently behind him, unaware that the next few days would bring even more conversations, questions, and decisions. But for now, he was simply grateful that the truth had finally come to light. The next morning arrived quietly, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. The sun rose slowly over the roofs, casting soft light across the tidy yards and sidewalks. Even though everything looked peaceful on the surface, everyone knew the past few days had changed the atmosphere in a way. No one could ignore the man at the center of it all woke up early. He didn't feel restless, just thoughtful. He sat at his kitchen table with a warm cup of coffee, staring out the window and waiting for the day to settle into its rhythm. He had lived in the community for a while, long enough to know that news traveled fast. But even he didn't expect how quickly things would spread. By mid-morning, several neighbors had reached out to him. Some came by in person, speaking in hushed voices, as though the walls had ears. Others left short messages simply saying they hoped he was all right. A few apologized on behalf of the neighborhood, even though they had done nothing wrong. He appreciated their kindness. It helped soften the weight of everything that had happened. Later in the day, he received an email from the HOA. The message was formal, but noticeably more respectful than usual. They acknowledged the situation and admitted they had reacted too quickly by defending the woman without looking at the evidence first. They said they were working on reviewing their rules, their communication process, and their board structure. They also said the woman would be temporarily removed from her duties while things were being sorted out. He read the email slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and disbelief. He didn't expect the HOA to admit anything. For years, they had acted like they were untouchable. Now they were finally facing the consequences of ignoring the needs of the people they were supposed to serve. Not long after, another notice went out to the entire community. It explained that there would be a meeting to discuss new guidelines and clearer expectations for board members. The message was calm and respectful, something the residents weren't used to. For the first time in a long while, the community felt like it was trying to move forward in a healthier way. Meanwhile, news about the woman continued to circulate. Rumors came and went, some exaggerated and others softened. People whispered about the police visit, the mistakes she made, and how surprising it was that something so small had grown into something so serious. But most of the conversations focused on the hope that the neighborhood might finally feel more balanced. The man stayed out of the gossip. He didn't want to add fuel to anything. He believed the situation had already gone far enough. He just wanted things to return to normal, or at least a better version of normal. That afternoon, he decided to step outside for a walk. The weather was warm and the breeze gentle. Several neighbors waved at him from their porches, offering friendly smiles. Some walked up to him to express their support. Others simply nodded in understanding. He felt grateful for every gesture, big or small. As he walked through the neighborhood, he noticed something different in the air. The tension that had once hung over the streets felt lighter. People seemed more relaxed, more open. It's almost as if they had been waiting years for a moment like this. He reached the entrance of the community and paused to look around. The flowers planted near the signs swayed in the wind. The sidewalks were clean, the lawns freshly trimmed, and the overall appearance of the neighborhood looked exactly the same as before. But inside, it felt transformed. A few days later, he received another call from the officer who had handled his case. The officer updated him on the situation, explaining that the woman had spent a night in custody and would be going through the proper legal process. The officer spoke clearly and respectfully, making sure the man understood that everything had been handled according to the law. When the call ended, he set his phone down and exhaled deeply. It wasn't satisfaction he felt, just closure. The issue had finally reached its end. In the following week, the neighborhood meeting took place. The community center filled with people who had quietly avoided gatherings for years. Everyone listened attentively as the board members discussed new plans and improvements. There was a new tone in the roomless sphere, more cooperation. Several residents shared their own experiences, talking about times when they felt uncomfortable, or unheard. It became clear that many people had been struggling silently. The man listened carefully, surprised by how much people had bottled up. In the end, the board promised to be more transparent, more considerate, and more willing to listen. They encouraged residents to share concerns openly and respectfully. The man felt hopeful as he left the meeting. It was the first time he believed real change was possible. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the neighborhood regained its calm. People walked to their dogs with more relaxed shoulders. Families chatted in driveways. Neighbors greeted one another warmly instead of rushing inside. The entire place felt more welcoming. One afternoon, the man received a quiet knock on his door. When he opened it, he saw a resident from down the street holding a small box with a ribbon around it. The person explained that a few neighbors had pitched in to send him a simple thank you gift for standing up. When no one else felt brave enough to, the gesture touched him deeply. He accepted the box with a warm smile, feeling a sense of connection he hadn't felt before. Life settled into a peaceful routine again. He went about his days normally, but every now and then, he would reflect on how everything had unfolded. He thought about the delivery that started it all, the video, the meetings, the conversations, and the unexpected outcome. What amazed him the most was how something so small had exposed something much bigger. He realized that sometimes it took one moment, one mistake, or one brave step to help a whole community grow. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, he felt a gentle calm wash over him. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink. Kids rode bikes down the street. A neighbor waved from across the road. The sound of laughter drifted through the air. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood felt whole. He took a slow sip of his drink and leaned back in his chair. The world wasn't perfect. People made mistakes. Rules got twisted. Feelings got hurt. But sometimes those difficult moments opened doors for better things. He didn't see himself as a hero. He didn't want attention. He just wanted fairness. And now, watching the calm street in front of him, he felt grateful that things had finally found their balance. The simple peace of that moment was worth everything that had happened. He closed his eyes for a brief second, letting the quiet breeze move past him. When he opened them again, he smiled softly. Life had moved forward, and so had the neighborhood.